Okay, welcome everyone to this webinar around building best practices and the right foundation for your first production workload. This is the first webinar in a series of 3, which will cover some of the key foundations you can put in place when moving a workload into the cloud. Today's session is a level 100 session, which means it will stay quite high level and is aimed at people who have just started using the cloud or who are about to go on that journey. The other 2 webinars in this series are around optimizing cost and efficiency on AWS and building a business case for the cloud. My name is Ralph Capel. I'm an account manager for Western Australia and South Australia, and I've been with AWS for the last 3 years and really happy to be with you today. So before we get started with the foundational aspects, I just wanted to level set a little bit and show you the basics around what AWS is today, for those who are totally new to the platform. So what you see on the slide here is what the AWS platform more or less looks like today. We have over 90 services, which is more than twice as many as when I started 3 years ago. And whether you're after some of our core services like compute, storage, databases, and networking, or some of the more advanced services like AI, machine learning, and IoT, everything is accessible with a click of a button through our self-service platform. All of these services sit on top of our global infrastructure, which comprises of 16 regions, 44 availability zones, and over 100 edge locations for our content delivery network. With AWS, you can go global in minutes, as deploying in Sydney works exactly the same as when you were to deploy in the US or Europe, for example. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the global infrastructure, into a specific region. So each region consists of 2 or more availability zones. And this is an important concept also from a foundational point of view. These availability zones, or AZs as we call them, are geographically isolated and fully independent clusters of data centers. However, the availability zones are close enough together, because they are in a geographical location, so that you can have single-digit millisecond latency between availability zones. This means you can run active-active applications and active-active databases across availability zones. Also important to know is that we don't move around your data. When you put it in a region, it stays in a region. Since AWS's inception in 2006, and especially accelerated when the Sydney region was launched in 2012, tens of thousands of customers across Australia and New Zealand are making use of the platform. From startups all the way up to the trusted Aussie enterprises. So have a look at some of the logos you see here on the slide. A lot of these companies have use cases as well that you can Google. So learning from these companies, AWS has designed a cloud adoption framework. So today I will cover some of the highlights of the cloud adoption framework, as well as some practical examples. Straight out of the gate, it is important to realize that there are quite a few business foundations to be set to be successful in the cloud, as well as some technical foundations, of course. So this is more or less our agenda for the next 30 to 45 minutes. Let's start with setting a vision. A successful cloud journey really starts with executive sponsorship. It's like a game of chess. You need to involve all the pieces on the chessboard in order to win. A lot of businesses we saw on the slide before feel that the cloud enables their IT department to provide real value to business outcomes. So whether you're a small startup that wants to turn the video industry upside down like Netflix once was, or an enterprise looking to reinvent itself and stay on top of ever-growing operational costs, moving production workloads to the cloud can and should have a significant impact to your business. It's therefore important to set a vision that addresses key business goals and include the relevant leaders in that vision. Maybe they can even help you set that vision. We see the best results with cloud projects being sponsored by CEOs and business leaders. So what kind of business goals and challenges can you think of? Well, you can think around goals around products, for example, like BMW did. They connected their 7 Series car to the cloud to make their navigation system smarter. It also served as a preamble to their autonomous driving program as well. Fairfax is now able to bring their magazines and newspapers to market quicker, more cost effectively, and in a way where only actual consumption of the digital goods is charged. General Electric sees a future where machinery and solutions are software-defined, responsive, and predictive. AWS gives them the platform to experiment that business idea affordably, as well as reduce their TCO on their legacy systems. So these are all companies who set a business vision and then utilize the platform to realize that vision. So on to people and roles. Once you get support from leadership and you have one or more business goals that you want to address, you will want to appoint somebody in your organization who is responsible for cloud. When you're a small organization, this might be one person that wears many hats. In a larger organization, however, this team may grow with people focusing on the specific cloud aspects for your business. So you may have a cloud practice lead, a cloud security lead, somebody who looks after governance and finance, and of course some dedicated IT cloud personnel as well. This cloud center of excellence will look different in every business as they need to align to your specific business. In every case, however, they need to have the appropriate cloud skills to do their role. They need to be an absolute leader and go-to person for questions related to cloud in their field. So if you, for example, have a cloud economics question, the cloud finance lead will have to be able to answer that internally. They will also be the liaison between the cloud vendor and your business, or if you choose to use an implementation partner, between that implementation partner and your business. So where can you get training for these people? When you're building the right foundation of skills in your organization, you probably want to have a look at the official certification paths towards solution architecture, DevOps, and sysadmin, for example. There are also specialized streams for security ops, big data and data warehousing. And for the dedicated IT cloud people who are really keen on getting a lot of certifications, some even go for the Holy Grail, which is basically obtaining all 5 professional certifications that are available today. The threshold to gain knowledge, though, is not necessarily that high. You can also just basically start online. You can start by watching tutorials on our AWS YouTube channel. There are AWS Quick Labs, which are usually 1-hour-long lab sessions on a specific topic or service. And there are several online training courses available as well, like, for example, the offering from A Cloud Guru or Udemy. This is something even AWS people use because it's very user-friendly and easy to access. Next to that, there are meetups all around Australia hosted by our partners, AWS Lunch and Learns in a city near you, and things like boot camps and awesome days every once in a while as well. If you really need a quick influx of skill, definitely go to our Amazon Partner Network website to find a good local or national partner. With regards to culture, nobody said it better than Peter Drucker. He professes that culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And whilst every company is different and not all cultural things work the same everywhere, I do want to leave you with some ideas of how Amazon itself creates a culture of innovation and utilizing the AWS platform. Because of the platform's agile nature, you will benefit from moving the decision-making processes to the edges of your organization. IT teams are able to spin up servers in minutes and have a website or application running in a matter of hours, not months. You don't want to constrain this by the traditional top-down procurement or management approval processes. However, that also means that the people at the edges have a bigger responsibility. And therefore at Amazon, if you build it, you run it as well. If something goes wrong with it, you are responsible, or your team is responsible to fix it. Of course, saying this is not enough. You need to build some mechanisms and add some new processes around these as well. So now we move the decision making to the teams at the edges of your organization so that then they can own the thing that they are working on. And at Amazon, we never let these teams grow beyond what we call 2 pizza teams. This basically means that you should be able to feed every team with 2 pizzas. Anything larger would mean that you would need to add further management and add processes and complexity that will hinder your team's agility in the cloud. Of course, you still need to manage these teams though. So set new cloud savvy KPIs around efficiency, number of experiments run, and number of processes simplified, for example. These are more outcome-based KPIs than procedural KPIs, and they will enhance your team's ownership and agility. Because you can measure pretty much everything in the cloud, you can measure the performance and actions of these teams systematically through capturing logs in CloudTrail and using CloudWatch. CloudWatch has the ability to send alerts and notifications as well, so you will always be up to date with what is happening in the cloud. You can also set up these triggers and alerts to trigger automated actions within your environment as well. So definitely set up CloudWatch. And this is an example of what CloudTrail looks like. The next one is to bring your development teams and operation teams together. In the cloud, the traditional scenario where developers throw their code over the fence to sysadmins isn't really necessary anymore, because your infrastructure is code now as well. Therefore, when these teams work together, best case is that you don't need to manage hardware and virtual machines at all anymore. So the sysadmins need to be involved from the start to make sure that the dev makes use of these auto-scaling features, for example. Whilst this may take a little bit more time to set up, it will help your speed of deployment going forward, and it will provide a base for automation, continuous integration, and continuous delivery of your applications. Lastly, build in an operational process that allows you to quality check and revisit your designs every so often. The AWS platform launches a significant amount of features and services every year. Last year we had over 1,000 new features. So you can immediately leverage these features and services, and it may either help you save cost, time, or get rid of undifferentiated heavy lifting in your architecture. So revisit your design regularly. So I wanted to give you an example of a company who does this really well as well, and I think there's no better example than Netflix. Netflix is all about creating a culture of freedom in their organization. This means their teams are autonomous and they can use the tools and technologies of their choice to create whatever they're working on, as long as it's connectable to the rest of the solution through APIs. Next to that, Netflix takes automation so seriously that they've created what they call the Simian Army. They felt that if they were going to give their customers the best possible experience, their application shouldn't rely on people and systems. because people make mistakes and systems fail all the time. So with the Simian Army, they've created an automated tool set, and they call them monkeys, that kill servers at random, cleans up after the dev and test teams, basically turning their machines off automatically when they're not using them. And they have a monkey that does conformity checks, for example, as well. The big gorilla that you see in the background there, that switches off a whole region, a whole AWS region, to test if they can cope with that as well. This really helps their engineers to focus on what creates value for their business, on that new functionality that they're adding to Netflix, instead of doing those mundane tasks and keeping the lights on. Whilst Netflix is a technology example that you might not be able to fully replicate in a traditional business, also companies like Oz Minerals and Suncorp use the cloud to bring cultural change. They see it as a tool to start accelerating innovation, use it for digital transformation, and by doing so, staying ahead of their competition. By the way, the Simian Army of Netflix is open source, so you can actually use that as well. Let's move on to some of the more technical foundational aspects, starting with design. There are a couple of different foundational strategies that you can consider when putting a production workload in the cloud. You can translate your on-premise environment one-to-one, or choose to do a refresh and uplift of your architecture. Let's have a look at both. The translation scenario is common when you're doing a large-scale lift and shift, have a small application with few business requirements, or if you have some legacy applications with many dependencies. Like the name implies, you are basically translating what you have on-premise one-to-one in the cloud. So on the left you see a couple of, well, let's say Citrix desktops, some servers, some disk, tape, and a master and slave SQL database. In the cloud you can copy that exactly. You can still run Citrix. Now the servers are Amazon EC2. You use Glacier for tape and S3 for the object storage. And you can run SQL Server, the SQL Server database either yourself on EC2 or through our relational database service, RDS. So you're effectively copying what you have. Even in this scenario, there are some foundational elements that you will need to be aware of, though. Because in the cloud you can spin up and spin down instances in minutes, make sure that you right-size the instances that you use in the cloud. You don't need to run that beefy machine at 10% utilization anymore, because if demand picks up, you can just right-size again and then swap when needed. That's where your biggest cost reductions will come from when doing this scenario. However, what we see a lot is that if companies had the option, and if it wouldn't break the bank, they would probably build some more resiliency and availability into their architecture. So when moving to the cloud, they choose to uplift their architecture. As you can see on this screen now, this architecture still has the same footprint. So it's not actually more expensive than the first architecture, but is making use of the multiple availability zones for both the web service and the database, which immediately increases the application's resiliency and availability from an infrastructure perspective. They also put EC2 in an auto-scaling group, making sure that the application scales up and down dynamically. And when demand decreases, scales back down again. This is a great way to decrease cost whilst increasing availability. So if one of Netflix's monkeys comes along and shoots down one of your EC2 servers, your application will continue to function normally. Not a lot of people know this, but also if you want to replace Citrix, we also have a managed service for that. You could replace that with AWS Workspaces as well. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. Like on the previous diagram, you see S3 and Glacier here on the borders of the availability zones. This is because these are regional managed services. And these regional managed services automatically make use of AWS's multi-AZ architecture. So whether you go for a direct translation or an uplift of your architecture in the cloud, there are some concepts that should always still apply. We can't stress enough to design for failure. Even though AWS manages the platform, hardware still fails all the time in the background. The benefit of the cloud is that you can actually do something about it without it costing you anything extra. Also make sure that you decouple components so that you can individually scale, replace, or tune if necessary. It adds resiliency and cost efficiency into your architecture. When decoupling, make use of AWS's managed services wherever possible as well. When you do the math, in most cases the TCO is better and it takes away the heavy lifting in your architecture. For example, I just mentioned S3. If you store an object in S3, it has 11 nines of durability. You wouldn't want to be managing that yourself. Lastly, scale is one of the key characteristics of the cloud. You can start extremely small, experiment rapidly, and then scale it automatically as demand grows, or turn it off if it's not successful. Also, when doing big data workloads, would it be worthwhile getting the outcome quicker? You can near infinitely scale on the AWS platform to get those complex queries done quickly. Because our costing is pretty much linear, it doesn't matter whether you run 10 machines for 1 hour or 1 machine for 10 hours. So think about how scale can help you solve business problems as well. Lastly, we spoke about bringing the dev and operation teams together. To do so, there will also need to be some design considerations. To get to that DevOps state, you will probably want to set up that continuous integration and development pipeline. It will allow you to do blue-green testing and quick deployments of code into production. Considering your deployment is a living thing, optimizing for cost will also be a continuous process. Think about optimizing for cost both for the short term and for the long term. So short-term options would be to turn systems off that are not used 24/7. Long-term things would be to use our reserved instance model, commercial model, for machines that are on all the time. So make that part of that revisiting your design. Of course, we couldn't talk about foundations without talking about security and compliance as well. AWS has the most compliance certificates of all cloud vendors. Some of the more commonly requested assurance programs in place are PCI Level 1, which means that you can store credit card holder data on top of AWS. SOC. SOC is an independent third-party examination report on how we achieve compliance controls and objectives. It helps customers understand what controls and processes AWS has in place to get all these compliance certifications. And ISO 27001 is also a popular one, and it basically certifies AWS's development and implementation of a rigorous security program. It's basically how we perpetually manage security in a holistic and comprehensive manner. And of course, there are many more industry-specific ones, like IRAP, for example, here in Australia. And we have this many certifications because security at AWS is our #1 priority. And we want our customers to inherit all the global best practices when it comes to security. However, whilst AWS is responsible for compliance and security of the cloud, you as a customer are responsible for what you put in the cloud. So everything that goes on top of our hypervisors is the customer's responsibility. So if you would like to be fully PCI certified, an independent assessor will still need to assess what you do in the cloud to test assess the full solution. A lot of these reports are available through our AWS Artifact service as well, and it's a self-service application. When we were talking about strategies for security, it's actually very similar to the design considerations I spoke about just now. The first option you have is to translate your current controls and measures you have in place directly to the cloud. While some things may be called differently in the cloud, traditional security concepts still apply, and you can map whatever you have on premise to do something comparable in the cloud. This is something Monash University did when they moved their student records and healthcare research from their data centers to AWS. They took this approach. More and more, though, we see customers using the cloud to increase their security posture. The CIO of Capital One said last year at our reInvent conference in Vegas that they believe that they can operate more securely in the cloud than in their own data centers. You can achieve this by either improving your existing controls, by refining them and making them more effective, and you can also extend existing controls by quickly testing, implementing, and scaling new security capabilities, like you could never do before, allowing for faster mitigation of risk. Encryption, for example, is often just a tick box you can select. So be sure that somebody in your Cloud Center of Excellence is aware of the security capabilities of the AWS platform. For your foundation, I would also recommend looking at our AWS Security Best Practices white paper. It's very prescriptive, and it will make sure that you cover all the bases in the cloud. So now that we've gone through some of the foundational aspects, both business and technical, let's finally go through picking the right workload. Working with customers, we've come across a couple of common themes. We often see customers putting fresh new workloads in the cloud, as the cloud often opens up new opportunities that didn't exist before, new markets, new capabilities, and is perfect for experimenting rapidly at low cost. When choosing to migrate an existing workload, make sure that the workload has the right risk profile, that it is impactful to your business, so that it actually solves that business objective that we spoke about earlier. And that it is something meaningful. If you're proving out a cloud journey and your first workload isn't meaningful, it will not challenge the old paradigm. So you see a couple of logos on the right there. So the Quanta story is actually quite interesting because it's a hybrid between a new and existing workload. They moved their big data analytics platform that calculates and simulates their flight plans to AWS. And whilst the workload pre-existed in their data centers, the cloud gave them the new capabilities to expand the data set and to process the flight plans in 4 days instead of 4 months. It also had a significant impact on their business because they were now able to save more fuel and open up new routes to Dallas, for example, from Sydney to Dallas, and from Perth to London. News Corp Australia started on AWS with digital workloads. They gained the right foundational experience through those workloads to then move over mission-critical workloads like Oracle JD Edwards. So depending on how impactful the workload is versus the risk, you might want to move certain workloads earlier or later on into your cloud journey. A deployment Vodafone did around live streaming cricket had a significant business impact for them as well. By moving to the cloud, they were instantly able to serve more than 3 times as many live streams simultaneously, resulting in better customer experience and more customers actually visiting the platform. Apart from the workload attributes, there are also some lifecycle triggers that you can look at. And this is something we will also dive a little bit deeper into in the next webinar, building a business case for the cloud. On the slide, you see some common triggers. Outside the new workload, of course, having a good time to look at a cloud is when an upgrade or refresh is coming up in your infrastructure. However, also consider software licensing here, because in the cloud you can actually save on that as well by making use of our managed services or by refactoring or right-sizing machines and their licenses for your workload. There might be a push for cost saving in your business. AWS's account team is happy to help you with TCO analysis for your environments. TCO is something that can easily be proven in the cloud based on known parameters or by simply spinning up a test environment. If the business case is favorable, just flip the switch and make it the production environment. Kogan, the online retailer, migrated within 5 weeks their e-commerce and SAP platforms onto AWS. And one of the main benefits for them was lowering their TCO. And I spoke about security before. If you have new security requirements, something that might cost a lot to implement all by yourself, think about moving to the cloud to raise your security posture without having to start from scratch. So what happens when you get all the foundations in place and everything is best practice? Well, you can expect something similar to what Domain, the property website, experienced. When Domain went all in with AWS in 2015, they saw a significant increase in the number of releases in production, as you can see in this graph. They were able to bring new features and functionality to their customers quicker and in a more structured way. Because they had automated everything, the number of errors and bugs decreased as well, resulting in much less time spent in after-hours support. Apart from the cost aspect, this of course also had a very positive impact on their support teams, who didn't need to work after hours anymore, or less at least. Mark Cohen, Domain CTO, said that using AWS lowers the cost of failure and fuels innovation. So a pretty cool story and great customer use case on how to set the right foundations and get success. So that's it for the main section of the webinar. But before we get to the Q&A, I want to leave you with some good next steps that you can take after this webinar. So exclusive to our webinar attendees, we'd like to offer the opportunity to secure a complimentary seat at the upcoming AWS Technical Essentials class. It's taking place next January at our AWS offices in Sydney and Melbourne. So these are instructor-led half-day training classes that introduce you to AWS products, services, and common solutions. It provides you with the fundamentals to become more proficient in identifying AWS services, so that you can make informed decisions about IT solutions based on your business requirements and get started working on AWS immediately. Please send an email to the address displayed on the slide, as seating is strictly limited. I would also recommend looking at some of the collateral we have around setting foundations and doing things best practice on AWS. The Cloud Adoption Framework document is a great place to start, and once you get going, the well-architected framework will also provide you with checks to make sure that everything stays in order going forward. Also, don't be afraid to use AWS's human resources. We have a great support department for both proactive and reactive use. We got a wide variety of cloud partners around Australia that can help execute immediately, and your account team is there to help navigate you in the right direction, both technically and from a commercial perspective. So I spoke about the 2 other webinars coming up. First up is optimizing the cost and efficiency of your AWS architecture. So this is for customers who have already started their cloud journey but are in the beginning stages, which is the 23rd of November, and the 30th of November is how to build your case for the cloud and how to engage your business stakeholders. So that will dive a little bit deeper into what we spoke about today as well. So please register through that link, and we will share the slides with you as well after this webinar. And if you are interested in learning some more about our customers and how they use AWS, feel free to click on some of those links on the screen as well. There are some great stories from Atlassian, Australia's hottest startup, Capital One, and NL, which is a large European energy conglomerate. So that's it from me. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on the chat. We will stick around for a little bit longer. And also, please do stay online to answer the poll questions as well. Thanks a lot for joining.